Hey, and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at render passes as well as Cryptomatte passes. Now, what is render passes? Render passes are almost like layers, like different lighting layers that you can use when you are compositing your footage together, so you've got more control to add adjustments to maybe just the direct lighting or just the reflections or just the glossiness of something, etc. So it will just give you more options when doing compositing. And Cryptomattes are also almost like a layer, but you can specify Cryptomattes to either be an object or a material. So you can then isolate certain materials in the compositing process, and it will just make your life a lot easier when doing compositing, which we will get to a bit later. So let's look at the available render passes in Blender. So to look at the render passes, you'll click on this little icon that says View Layer Properties here on the right hand side, and here you will see a whole list of all these render passes. So you can see we have things like combined, Z, mist, position, all of these ones, and then you have your light layers or your light passes, which will be diffuse, glossy, and all of these ones, and then Cryptomatte right here at the bottom. So let's go from the top and see which of these passes we want to render. So combined basically means it's all the layers combined, and that's also called a beauty pass, and that will have everything included already, like all the layers combined. So we want to keep that just to make sure that we have that if we need it. Now we're not going to do a Z pass, but we're going to do a mist pass. Now the mist pass is almost like a Z depth pass, and that will allow us to add some mist into the scene, so that or mist or haze, because if you look at footage in real life, you can see the haziness of the objects further in the distance and then less hazy for objects closer to the camera. And that's just something that we can use in compositing to maybe add a mist layer. So if we have any objects that's further away in the background, we can use this mist pass to create that hazy look. So that's always a important pass to include. So we're not going to include any of these other details here. We're going to scroll down to these light passes. So we want to include diffuse, all of these direct, indirect, and color for diffuse. Same with glossy, you can tick all of them. Transmission we don't really need, because transmission is only if you have transparent objects in your scene, like glass or anything like water or liquids or stuff like that. But we can include them just so that we have them, but it's not really going to have any data in them, because as I said, we don't have any transparent objects in the scene. Volume we don't really need. This is if you have anything like smoke or fire, any volume effects, so you can add them if you want to, but yeah, as I say, we don't use any of these volume effects. And then for emission, we don't need this because we don't have any emission materials in our scene, so we're going to skip that. So the only thing we want to include here is shadow, also ambient occlusion, and then also the shadow catcher. So it's going to just separate all these layers for us so that we have full control in compositing to tweak them separately. Now let's go down and we'll get to the Cryptomatte section. Now here we've got three options: object, material, and asset. So usually I only use object or material, and basically this will give you like a layer for each object in the scene. So I'm simply going to tick this object, and that will, it will basically just give us a separate layer for every individual object in the scene, so we can easily mask them when doing compositing. So let's say we want to create or we want to adjust the lighting on just one object. This will allow us to do that. So let's quickly look at this list again. So from the top, you just want to include combined and mist. And then if you scroll down, you want to include all the diffuse passes, all the glossy passes, all transmission that we don't really use in the scene, and then shadow, ambient occlusion, shadow catcher, and then under Cryptomatte you want to enable the object setting right there. So one thing to note about the mist pass, we can actually specify the distance of the starting point of the mist and also the end point, or the furthest away from the camera. So to do that, let's just go back into solid view for now, and then we want to, once you've activated the mist pass here in the render passes, you can go to the world settings, this little earth icon, and then you'll see the mist pass right here. Now we don't see the limits in the scene yet because we need to activate that. So to do that, click on the camera, go to the camera settings here on the right hand side, then expand viewport display, and then you'll see a mist tick box. So just enable the mist tick box, and now you'll see these limits in the scene right here. You can see a starting point and an end point. So these are basically the limits of the mist pass. So now what we can do is we can go to this world icon again, and now under this mist pass drop down, you've got your start. You can see I can configure or set the start position from the camera, and I can also set the depth or the end where the mist pass is going to end. So you can kind of match this to all the objects in your scene, because we only have objects in this area. So I want the end of the mist pass to kind of be behind all of them. So obviously if I set it to maybe something like this, that means the mist will go from very opaque to transparent right here. So you want to just try and get the mist pass to include everything in the scene, the distance basically. So the starting point can be close to the camera, and the depth can be the furthest or further as the furthest object in your scene, maybe something like that. Alright, let's look through the camera again, and now I can see we've got those limits. We can hide those limits again if you want to. You can go to your camera settings and just disable this little tick box under view display to hide it from the camera view if it gets a little bit too busy. And now let's just do a quick render view again, because I think there's one thing we just need to be careful about. So if we look at our shadow catcher and we just kind of zoom in here, you will see this edge right at the top where our shadow catcher basically is. And the reason we can see that is because this bottom shadow catcher, the floor plane shadow catcher, is actually bouncing light and reflections onto the shadow catcher. So what I usually do is let's select our floor shadow catcher, and then let's go to this object properties, this little orange square. And then if you scroll down to where we enabled shadow catcher, you'll see some other options here by ray visibility. And all you want to do is you want to disable the diffuse and the glossy on all your shadow catchers. So we've done this now for the ground shadow catcher or the floor shadow catcher. And I'm going to select this wall shadow catcher as well and do the same. So under the object properties, just disable diffuse and glossy, so we don't get those bouncing or the light bouncing against our shadow catchers. So now you can see we still get the shadows on the wall and the shadows on the floor, but we don't get that harsh line going across our wall right there. So go ahead and save your project now, and I will see you in the next lesson.